Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere very old. So old, in fact, that even the oldest castles in Europe would look like shiny new apartment buildings by comparison. Tonight, we're wandering through what many historians consider the world's first true city. A place where thousands of people somehow agreed that living close together, paying taxes, building temples, and arguing over grain storage sounded like a reasonable way to spend their lives. As always, dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe grab a blanket, and let the story slowly drift around you. There's no mystery to solve tonight. No cliffhangers, no dramatic countdowns. Just a quiet walk through ancient streets where almost everyone has been gone for over 5,000 years. We'll move slowly. We'll meet ordinary workers, sleepy priests, stubborn kings, exhausted scribes, and merchants who probably spent half their day complaining about shipping delays. Some things, it turns out, never really change, and if you happen to fall asleep somewhere between the invention of writing and a particularly boring tax record, well, the ancient accountants would probably consider that a compliment. So take a deep breath. Let's quietly travel back to southern Mesopotamia. Long before Rome, long before Egypt built its greatest pyramids, long before Greece argued about philosophy, we're heading toward a city called Uruk. Imagine opening your eyes just before sunrise. There are no engines, no airplanes crossing the sky, no glowing phone beside your bed reminding you that you promised yourself you'd sleep earlier tonight. Instead, you hear birds, a donkey somewhere nearby, the gentle splash of water moving through irrigation canals. The air smells slightly damp, clay, reeds, wood smoke, fresh bread beginning to bake. Welcome to around 3200 BC. You're standing outside one of the most extraordinary places humanity has ever built, Uruk. Today it looks like little more than dusty ruins in southern Iraq, but in its own time, it was astonishing. Historians estimate that at its height, somewhere between 40 and perhaps even 80,000 people lived here. That may not sound enormous today. Modern football stadiums sometimes hold that many people for a single afternoon. But 5,000 years ago, it was almost unimaginable. For thousands upon thousands of years, humans had lived mostly in small villages. Everyone knew everyone. If your neighbor borrowed your goat, you knew exactly where he lived. If someone burned dinner, the whole village probably smelled it. Life was simple. Then something changed. Agriculture became better. Canals carried water across dry land. Harvests became larger. Surplus food meant not everyone had to spend every waking moment farming. Some people became builders. Others became priests. Others became traders. Others became administrators. And before anyone fully realized what was happening, villages quietly became cities. Uruk wasn't simply bigger, it was different, entirely different. For perhaps the first time, strangers lived together in enormous numbers. You could walk through part of the city and see faces you'd never seen before. That sounds perfectly normal today. Back then, it was revolutionary. Humans were inventing urban life almost by accident, like someone assembling furniture without reading the instructions, which, honestly, is basically how civilization has often worked ever since. The city itself stretched across the flat plains between the great rivers. The Euphrates flowed nearby, though over thousands of years, its course would slowly shift. The landscape looked peaceful from a distance. Green fields, canals, palm trees, wide skies. Yet beneath that calm appearance was one of history's greatest engineering achievements. Nothing here happened naturally. Almost every field depended upon carefully managed irrigation. Workers constantly repaired canals, removed mud, strengthened banks, directed water. Without those canals, the city simply wouldn't exist. Ancient Mesopotamia has often been called the land between rivers. That's technically true, but perhaps it should also be called the land where everyone spent an unbelievable amount of time worrying about water. Too much water? Flooding. Too little? Famine. Canals break? Everyone has a very unpleasant year. Civilization, it turns out, rests upon surprisingly ordinary maintenance work. Not exactly glamorous. The kings receive statues. The canal repair crews receive sore backs. History can be a little unfair sometimes. As the morning sun rises higher, people begin filling the streets. These roads aren't paved. Dust rises beneath sandals. Children chase each other. Dogs wander lazily. Donkeys carry baskets of barley. Merchants open tiny shops. Potters display fresh jars. Carpenters smooth wooden beams. Everything feels busy, not frantic, just steadily alive. Most buildings are made from mud bricks. Stone is rare here. Timber is expensive. Mud, however, mud is wonderfully abundant. The rivers generously provide endless supplies. Workers mix clay with straw, shape bricks, dry them beneath the hot sun, build walls, repeat, generation after generation. Of course, mud bricks don't last forever. Rain slowly damages them. Buildings require repairs. Entire neighborhoods gradually rise higher over centuries as old structures collapse and new ones are built directly on top. The city literally grows upward, layer by layer, century after century. Archaeologists absolutely love this. Construction workers probably complained about it. Now let's quietly wander toward the heart of Uruk. Even from a distance, something dominates the skyline. The temples. Massive platforms rise above the surrounding houses. These aren't merely places for worship. They're economic centers, political centers, storage centers, administrative headquarters. Religious life and government are almost impossible to separate. Priests oversee enormous operations, thousands of workers, huge grain reserves, livestock, craft production, trade, land ownership. If you're imagining a peaceful little temple with a few candles, think much bigger, much busier, more like a giant corporation. Except everyone believes the CEO is a goddess, which creates an interesting management structure. The city's greatest deity is Inanna, later known by another name, Ishtar. She represents love, war, power, fertility, political authority. Quite an impressive collection of responsibilities. Modern job descriptions rarely ask quite so much from one employee. Her temple stands proudly above the city, colorful, decorated, visible from great distances. Pilgrims arrive bringing offerings. Priests perform rituals. Musicians play. Incense drifts through the air. Life here moves according to religious calendars. Festivals, ceremonies, offerings. Season after season. The gods, after all, must remain happy. Nobody wants divine complaints arriving during harvest season. Not everyone spends their day praying. Far from it. Let's visit one of history's newest professions, the scribe. At first glance, his job appears wonderfully peaceful. He sits cross-legged. Beside him lies damp clay. In his hand rests a sharpened reed stylus. He presses tiny wedge-shaped marks into soft tablets. Patiently, carefully, methodically. This is writing, or rather, the earliest form that's beginning to resemble writing. It didn't start with poetry, or philosophy, or dramatic love letters. Sorry, romantics. Writing began because someone desperately needed better accounting. How much grain entered storage? Who delivered sheep? Which worker received beer rations? Who owes taxes? Civilization's greatest intellectual breakthrough was inspired partly by paperwork. History has a delightful sense of irony. These early symbols gradually become what we now call cuneiform. Thousands upon thousands of clay tablets survive. Many contain surprisingly ordinary information: receipts, inventories, contracts, lists, administrative records. Ancient bureaucracy may sound dull, yet these records allow modern historians to reconstruct everyday life with astonishing detail. Somewhere, an accountant accidentally became immortal, not through fame, not through conquest, simply because clay lasts a remarkably long time. Paper burns, papyrus decays. Clay patiently waits 5,000 years beneath the soil. Very dependable, very quiet, rather appropriate for tonight's story. Education for scribes isn't easy. Students spend years copying symbols. Again, again, again. Mistakes happen. Teachers correct them. probably with considerably less patience than modern schools. Some surviving practice tablets still contain obvious errors. It's strangely comforting. Even the inventors of writing occasionally got homework wrong. One can almost hear an exhausted student sighing across 50 centuries. Do I really have to copy this list of barley measurements again? Yes. Yes. Apparently you do. Because civilization depends upon accurate barley measurements. Exciting? Perhaps not. Important? Absolutely. And somewhere in the distance, the city continues humming softly beneath the growing morning sun. Thousands of lives unfolding together. The world's first great city, slowly discovering what urban life really means. And it's only just getting started. The morning has now settled comfortably over Uruk. The sun climbs a little higher, warming the mud brick walls until they begin to glow with soft shades of gold and brown. The streets become busier, though by modern standards they still feel surprisingly peaceful. No roaring engines, no construction jackhammers. No notifications buzzing every 30 seconds reminding you that someone liked a picture of their lunch. Just people, thousands of them, working, talking, carrying things from one place to another. Civilization, despite all the monuments and legends, mostly consists of people trying to finish today's chores before tomorrow creates new ones. And honestly, that has never really changed. Let's wander through one of the residential neighborhoods. From outside, many houses look almost identical. Simple mud brick walls, flat roofs, very few windows facing the street. Privacy mattered. The real life of the house happened around an open courtyard in the middle. Step inside, and suddenly the space feels cooler. Shade covers much of the courtyard. A few clay pots sit against one wall. A small oven smolders gently. Someone has spread reeds on the ground to dry. Children move in and out of the rooms, entirely unconcerned that 5,000 years later, historians would be endlessly fascinated by the layout of their home. To them, it's just Tuesday. Well, whatever the Sumerian equivalent of Tuesday happened to be, the ancient calendar was a little more complicated than ours, probably because humanity has always enjoyed making calendars surprisingly difficult. A woman kneels beside a large grinding stone. She pours barley into the upper stone and slowly turns it. Hour after hour, the sound is soft, stone against stone. Grain becoming flour. This is exhausting work. Modern kitchen appliances have spoiled us. Push one button. Walk away. Maybe check your phone while the machine does everything. In Uruk, every loaf of bread begins with physical labor. Real labor. The kind that leaves your shoulders aching before breakfast. And yet bread is everywhere. Barley bread, emmer wheat bread, flat bread, simple bread, nothing fancy. No artisan sourdough with 12-hour fermentation and a dramatic Instagram photo. Just bread, reliable, necessary. A civilization can survive without luxury. It struggles without bread. Nearby, another family prepares beer. Now, before anyone imagines ancient taverns full of loud singing and dramatic drinking contests, ancient Mesopotamian beer was different, very different. It was thick, cloudy, sometimes almost porridge-like. People often drank it through long reeds that acted like ancient drinking straws. The straws filtered out bits of grain floating near the surface. A surprisingly clever solution. Sometimes the oldest inventions remain the smartest. Beer wasn't simply entertainment. It was nutrition, safe hydration, daily calories. Workers often received beer as payment. Imagine receiving part of your salary in beverages. Some modern workplaces might accidentally become far more popular. Children race across the courtyard chasing a dog that clearly has no interest in participating. The dog wins effortlessly, as dogs usually do. Children in Uruk looked remarkably similar to children today. They played games. They argued. They ignored adults whenever possible. They invented imaginary adventures. They occasionally helped with household work, probably after being asked several times. Parents, it seems, have always mastered the ancient art of repeating themselves. Some traditions are simply eternal. Education depended greatly on family status. Most children learned practical skills from their parents. Farmers raised future farmers. Potters trained future potters. Metal workers taught future metal workers. Knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next, not through textbooks, through observation, repetition, patience, and occasional mistakes. Lots of mistakes. That's how humans usually learn. Even today, only now our mistakes sometimes come with software updates. Let's continue toward the marketplace. The streets become wider. Voices blend into a gentle background hum. Donkeys patiently carry heavy baskets. Merchants spread woven mats displaying their goods. Someone sells fish caught earlier that morning. Another offers dates harvested from nearby palm groves. A potter proudly arranges freshly fired bowls. A textile seller shakes dust from woven cloth. The market smells wonderful. Fresh bread, cooked onions, roasted grain, dates, warm earth, smoke from cooking fires. And somewhere nearby, a donkey who has apparently decided that today is an excellent day to express every opinion it has ever had, rather loudly. Donkeys remain remarkably committed to dramatic public statements across all recorded history. Trade made Uruk wealthy. But the city faced one significant problem. It lacked many natural resources. There wasn't much stone, very little quality timber, few useful metals. So the people of Uruk became expert traders. Boats floated along rivers, carrying goods across enormous distances. Caravans crossed difficult landscapes. Merchants negotiated endlessly. Copper arrived from distant mountains. Timber came from forests hundreds of miles away. Precious stones traveled astonishing distances before reaching Mesopotamia. The ancient world was far more connected than many people imagine. Trade networks stretched across vast regions, long before passports, long before shipping containers, long before anyone complained that their package was delayed by 2 days. Ancient merchants understood patience. Sometimes your shipment literally crossed deserts. Waiting was simply part of business. One merchant carefully counts small bundles of wool. Nearby, another examines polished beads made from lapis lazuli. The brilliant blue stone came from what is now Afghanistan. Think about that for a moment. 5,000 years ago, people were already moving luxury goods across thousands of kilometers, without trucks, without trains, without airplanes, mostly using animals, boats, and determination, an incredible amount of determination. Now our slow walk brings us toward the workshops. This part of Uruk never truly sleeps. Potters shape wet clay with astonishing speed. Their wheels spin steadily beneath practiced hands. One smooth movement becomes a bowl. Another becomes a storage jar. Another becomes a drinking cup. Years of experience flow through every motion. Watching a skilled potter almost feels hypnotic. Round and round, the wheel spins, the clay rises, hands gently guide it. No wasted movement, no hurry, just quiet mastery. Nearby, bronze workers heat small furnaces. The technology remains relatively young. Metal is precious. Every tool matters. Broken tools aren't casually thrown away. They're repaired, reshaped, melted down, used again. People owned fewer possessions than we do today, but each possession carried greater value. A simple knife might serve a family for years, perhaps decades. Modern society often celebrates buying new things. Ancient society celebrated making old things last. There is something quietly admirable about that. The textile workshops are equally busy. Women spin wool into thread. Others weave cloth on upright looms. Thread crosses thread. Slowly, patiently. Hours become days. Days become weeks. A single garment requires remarkable effort. When clothing demands that much work, people naturally appreciate it more. Fashion trends move much more slowly when every outfit represents weeks of labor. Nobody wakes up thinking, I have absolutely nothing to wear, because they probably own 4 outfits, and every single one required enormous effort to create. Decision-making becomes refreshingly simple. As afternoon approaches, the heat begins to settle over the city. Workers slow slightly. Shade becomes increasingly valuable. Many people rest briefly during the hottest hours. Even animals seek shelter. The streets grow quieter. Only a few determined merchants continue calling for customers. Perhaps business isn't especially exciting at this hour, but hope springs eternal. Someone always believes the next customer will definitely buy something. Salesmanship, apparently, is one of humanity's oldest forms of optimism. Not everyone in Uruk enjoys the same comfortable life. Society has already become highly organized and unequal. Some families possess large homes. Others live much more modestly. Power concentrates around temples and wealthy elites. Laborers spend long days maintaining canals, harvesting crops, carrying heavy loads, and constructing massive buildings they may never fully enjoy. The great monuments of history usually have two stories, the one carved into stone and the one carried home each evening by tired workers. The workers rarely become famous, yet without them, nothing gets built. History often remembers kings. Civilization remembers workers, even if their names have disappeared. Somewhere beyond the city walls, farmers continue tending fields. Their lives follow the rhythm of seasons rather than politics. Water arrives. Seeds grow. Harvest comes, grain fills storage jars. The entire city depends on these quiet routines. Without successful harvests, the temples cannot function. The merchants have little to trade. The scribes have fewer records to keep. Even kings become considerably less impressive when everyone is hungry. Food has always been civilization's foundation. Everything else rests upon it. As the afternoon slowly drifts toward evening, long shadows begin stretching across Uruk. The air cools. Birds return. Families prepare the evening meal. Smoke rises gently from hundreds of rooftops. Children grow quieter. Workers finally head home. Another ordinary day nears its end. No one living here realizes they are building one of history's greatest civilizations. To them, they're simply living, fixing roofs, grinding grain, writing receipts, arguing over prices, repairing canals, telling stories after dinner. Sometimes history doesn't feel historic while it's happening. It simply feels like everyday life. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about Uruk. It wasn't built by legendary heroes every single day. It was built by ordinary people. One loaf of bread, one clay tablet, one brick, one quiet sunset at a time. The stars are beginning to appear above the flat Mesopotamian horizon. The city slows. The temples prepare their evening rituals. And somewhere, a scribe is probably still finishing one last inventory before finally calling it a day. Some habits never change. Evening settles gently over Uruk. The heat of the day slowly slips away, carried off by a light breeze drifting across the flat plains of southern Mesopotamia. Shadows stretch across the city's winding streets, softening the sharp edges of the mud brick walls. The marketplace grows quieter. Donkeys finally receive a well-earned rest. Children reluctantly wander back toward home after squeezing every possible moment out of daylight, parents begin preparing the evening meal. If you've ever told a child, "It's time to come inside," only to hear, "5 more minutes," congratulations. You've participated in one of humanity's oldest traditions. As darkness approaches, the city's tallest buildings become even more impressive. The temple complexes rise above everything else. From nearly every neighborhood, you can look upward and see them standing proudly against the fading sky. For the people of Uruk, these weren't simply impressive buildings. They were the center of existence. The gods lived here, or at least their earthly homes did. And keeping the gods happy was considered everyone's business. A poor harvest? Perhaps the gods were displeased. Unexpected flooding? Maybe a ritual had been neglected. Disease spreading through livestock. Someone somewhere was surely asking whether the proper offerings had been made. Modern people often search for scientific explanations. The people of Uruk searched for divine ones. Neither group enjoyed uncertainty very much. Humans have always preferred answers over mysteries. The greatest temple belongs to Inanna. She is unlike many later deities who fit neatly into one category. Inanna refuses to be simple. She governs love, but also war, beauty, but also political power, fertility, yet also fierce ambition. She is both gentle and dangerous, complicated, which, if we're being fair, makes her feel surprisingly human. Ancient civilizations often imagined their gods behaving very much like powerful people. They loved, they argued, they became jealous. They rewarded loyalty. They punished arrogance. In many ways, the gods reflected the societies that imagined them. Inside the temple complex, priests continue their work long after most citizens return home. Contrary to what movies sometimes suggest, priests don't spend every hour chanting mysterious spells in candlelit rooms. Much of their work is administrative. Yes, even religion requires paperwork. There are grain deliveries to record, animals to count, workers to organize, offerings to distribute, land to manage. Temple property is enormous. Some temples own fields, herds of sheep, fishing boats, workshops, entire groups of laborers. Running one of these institutions resembles managing a giant business, except your most important client is invisible, and no one wants to disappoint the client. Let's quietly step inside one of the storage buildings. Rows upon rows of enormous clay jars line the walls. Some hold barley. Others contain dates. Others preserve oil. Each jar represents wealth, food, security, survival. Nearby sits another scribe. Yes, another one. Civilization seems strangely determined to produce endless scribes. His reed stylus presses tiny wedge-shaped marks into wet clay. One shipment recorded. Another counted. another sealed. Some of these tablets survive thousands of years later. Archaeologists read them today. Imagine discovering that the thing which makes you famous forever is correctly documenting 16 baskets of barley. History has a wonderfully unexpected sense of humor. Writing itself continues evolving. Earlier systems relied heavily on pictures. Draw a fish. It means fish. Simple enough. But life becomes more complicated. How do you record ideas? Names, actions, numbers. Gradually the symbols change. Pictures become abstract marks, tiny wedges pressed into clay. Thousands of them. The system grows more flexible, more powerful, harder to learn. Students everywhere collectively sigh across the centuries. Every useful skill eventually becomes homework. Learning to write is anything but easy. Young apprentices spend years practicing, copying symbols, repeating exercises, memorizing hundreds of signs. Some signs represent words, others represent sounds, others change meaning depending on context. Anyone who has struggled to learn another language may find unexpected sympathy for these ancient students. At least modern notebooks don't weigh several pounds each. Clay tablets are durable. They are not especially portable. Imagine carrying 6 math textbooks made entirely of bricks. Suddenly your backpack seems much more reasonable. As night slowly deepens, storytellers begin entertaining families gathered in courtyards. There are no televisions, no radios, no streaming services asking if you're still watching. Entertainment comes from people, stories passed from memory to memory, generation after generation. Some tales describe clever animals, others tell of ancient heroes, others explain how the world came into existence. The stars overhead provide the perfect ceiling for these evening performances. Children listen closely. Adults pretend they already know every story. Yet they still smile when favorite moments arrive. Some traditions never lose their charm. Among the stories growing popular in Uruk is one about a king unlike any other. His name is Gilgamesh. Now here's where history and legend begin holding hands. Did Gilgamesh really exist? Possibly. Many scholars believe an actual king of Uruk ruled sometime around 2700 BC. Over generations, however, memory transforms him. Real achievements become legendary ones. Ordinary victories become impossible adventures. Before long, Gilgamesh is no longer merely a king. He becomes 2/3 divine, extraordinarily strong, unmatched in battle, capable of incredible feats. Human imagination has always enjoyed making successful people just a little taller than life. Sometimes, much taller. According to later stories, Gilgamesh begins as an arrogant ruler. He believes power belongs entirely to him, not exactly a rare condition among kings. History has diagnosed this illness many times. The gods decide perhaps he needs perspective, so they create Enkidu, a wild man, raised among animals, strong enough to challenge the king himself. Eventually the two meet. Naturally, they fight, because apparently that's how legendary friendships often begin. After an enormous struggle, neither truly defeats the other. Instead, they become inseparable companions. It's a surprisingly touching idea. Sometimes the person capable of challenging you becomes your greatest friend. Together they undertake extraordinary adventures. They travel enormous distances, face terrifying creatures, seek everlasting fame. The details grow increasingly mythical. Yet beneath the fantastic events lies something deeply human. Friendship, loss, fear, hope. Questions about death, questions about purpose. The Epic of Gilgamesh eventually becomes one of humanity's oldest surviving works of literature. Thousands of years later, readers still recognize the emotions inside it. Kings change, empires disappear, languages fade. People still wonder why life ends. Some questions never become outdated. The story takes a quieter turn after tragedy strikes. Enkidu dies. For perhaps the first time, Gilgamesh fully understands mortality. His strength cannot prevent loss. His royal status cannot bargain with death. Suddenly the mighty king becomes frightened, not of enemies, not of war, but of time itself. It is one of the oldest fears humans possess, and perhaps one of the gentlest, because everyone eventually asks the same question: how long do I have? Gilgamesh begins searching for eternal life. His journey leads him across distant lands. He meets wise figures, survives impossible challenges, receives precious advice. Again and again, however, the answer remains frustratingly consistent. Immortality belongs to the gods. Humans receive something else, a limited life. What matters is how that life is lived, not how long it lasts. It's a surprisingly peaceful conclusion, especially for one of the oldest stories ever written. Back in the real city of Uruk, ordinary people know nothing of future epics. They simply continue living. A baker prepares tomorrow's bread. A merchant counts today's earnings. A farmer checks irrigation gates beneath the moonlight. A mother quietly rocks a sleepy child. Somewhere, an elderly grandfather tells stories he once heard from his own grandfather. Nobody realizes those stories may still be remembered thousands of years later. History often preserves the things people never expected to survive. The moon now hangs high above the city. Its pale light reflects softly across canals winding through the countryside. Most homes have gone quiet. The marketplace sleeps. Temple fires burn gently in the distance. A few guards slowly patrol the city walls, not because danger is constant, but because cities this large require organization. Someone must always remain awake. Civilization never truly sleeps, even when most people do. High above, the stars shine brilliantly. Without electric lights, the night sky is breathtaking. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a pale river of light. Ancient astronomers study these stars carefully. They don't yet possess telescopes. They don't understand galaxies, but they observe patiently, night after night, year after year. Patterns emerge, seasons change, calendars improve, knowledge grows quietly. Scientific discovery often begins with simply paying attention. The people of Uruk may not know where the stars truly are, but they know they matter, and for tonight, that is enough. The city rests beneath the endless heavens. Its kings dream of glory. Its priests dream of favorable omens. Its merchants dream of profitable journeys. Its children dream whatever children have always dreamed. Tomorrow the sun will rise again over the world's first great city, and with it, Uruk will continue inventing civilization, one ordinary day at a time. Morning arrives once again over Uruk, not dramatically. The sun doesn't burst over the horizon with cinematic music playing in the background. No one pauses to admire a perfect sunrise while delivering an inspirational speech. The people of Uruk are far too busy for that. The day simply begins. Roosters call. Dogs stretch. Someone is already baking bread. Someone else has already started complaining about the weather. Some things, it seems, were invented almost immediately after civilization itself. Today, instead of remaining inside the city walls, let's quietly wander out through one of Uruk's great gates. The streets gradually become less crowded. The houses thin out. Soon the sounds of the marketplace fade behind us. Ahead lies something even more important than the temples, the fields. Cities often receive all the attention. Historians love talking about kings, monuments, and famous buildings. But every single one of those impressive achievements depended on something much less glamorous: farmers. Without them, there is no Uruk, no temples, no scribes, no kings, certainly no royal arguments over who deserved the bigger palace. Food comes first. Everything else waits its turn. The countryside surrounding Uruk doesn't resemble untouched wilderness. Nearly every part of the landscape has been shaped by human hands. Canals stretch across the plains like long ribbons. Small ditches branch away toward individual fields. Earthen embankments guide precious water exactly where it's needed. From above, the entire landscape might resemble a giant web. Every channel has a purpose. Every bend matters. One broken section could leave entire farms without water. Imagine living in a place where your entire year's harvest depends on a ditch remaining exactly where it belongs. Suddenly, canal maintenance sounds much more exciting. Well, perhaps important is a better word than exciting. Let's not get carried away. Several farmers are already working near the canals. One kneels in the mud, repairing a small breach where water has begun escaping. Another clears reeds growing too thickly along the banks. A younger worker uses a wooden shovel to remove accumulated silt. The work is slow, steady, necessary. Nobody applauds. Nobody records their names. Yet every person inside Uruk depends upon these quiet efforts. History often celebrates the spectacular. Civilization survives because of the ordinary. The fields themselves are filled mostly with barley. Barley is remarkably dependable. It tolerates difficult conditions better than many other grains. It provides food, animal feed, and, as we discovered yesterday, beer. Quite an impressive resume for one humble plant. The people here understand barley intimately. They know when to plant, when to irrigate, when to harvest, when to store it safely before pests arrive. Generations of careful observation have created an impressive body of agricultural knowledge. No universities, no scientific journals, just experience passed from parent to child over centuries. Sometimes wisdom grows quietly, like crops themselves. Nearby, a pair of oxen slowly pull a wooden plow through damp soil. The animals move patiently. The farmer walks behind them, guiding the blade through the earth. It's repetitive work, hour after hour, row after row. Yet compared to digging everything by hand, the plow represents extraordinary technology. Humans often imagine innovation as computers or rockets. But for ancient farmers, a better plow could transform life. More land cultivated, larger harvests, more food. Sometimes history changes because someone improves a very ordinary tool. Children help where they can. One carries water, another watches younger siblings. A teenager gathers bundles of reeds for repairing irrigation channels. Work is part of everyday life from an early age. Not because childhood is unimportant, but because survival requires everyone's contribution. Still, children find opportunities to play. One boy balances carefully along a canal bank, as though walking a tightrope. His friend immediately tries to do the same. Predictably, someone slips into the mud. Fortunately, laughter appears to be just as old as civilization. Let's continue farther from the city. Palm groves sway gently in the warm breeze. Date palms are among the region's greatest treasures. They provide fruit, shade, wood, fibers. Even the leaves find useful purposes. Ancient writers would later say that the date palm offered hundreds of different uses. That may be a slight exaggeration. Humans do enjoy enthusiastic counting when praising something they love. Still, the date palm truly deserves its reputation. It supports life in countless ways. Standing beneath one offers welcome relief from the growing heat. Sometimes the greatest luxury is simply a little shade. Beyond the cultivated fields lies open grazing land. Shepherds guide sheep and goats across sparse vegetation. The animals move together in surprisingly organized groups, or perhaps surprisingly disorganized, depending on which sheep decides today's adventure involves wandering in exactly the wrong direction. Shepherding requires endless patience. The shepherd walks, waits, calls, walks again, repeats. If you've ever tried convincing a particularly stubborn pet to cooperate, you already understand part of the job. Wool from these sheep becomes one of Uruk's most valuable products. Entire workshops inside the city transform raw fleece into thread and cloth. Temple institutions own enormous flocks. Keeping careful records of every animal becomes another task for, yes, our hard-working scribes. Somewhere back in the city, another clay tablet receives another entry. 1 lamb born, 2 sheep transferred, 3 goats exchanged. The accountants remain undefeated. Life on the farms isn't always easy. The rivers that make civilization possible can also create enormous problems. Sometimes floods arrive too early, sometimes too late, sometimes not at all. Rainfall is unpredictable. The people of southern Mesopotamia cannot simply wait for nature to cooperate. They actively manage water every single season. Success depends on planning, coordination, and a little luck, quite a lot of luck actually. Ancient farming is part science, part engineering, part hopeful optimism. The climate presents another challenge. Over time, irrigation leaves behind tiny amounts of salt in the soil. Year after year, those deposits slowly increase. Eventually, some fields become less productive. Farmers notice crops struggling. Harvests shrink. The problem develops so gradually that no single generation fully understands what's happening. It's one of history's earliest environmental challenges. The people adapt as best they can, switching crops, changing farming methods, expanding into new land. Human beings have always been remarkably resourceful when faced with difficult circumstances. Not perfect, but resourceful. As the sun climbs higher, work slows. The midday heat settles across the plains like a heavy blanket. Even the animals seem less interested in moving. Farmers gather beneath palm trees or simple reed shelters. Lunch is modest: bread, dates, perhaps onions, maybe a little cheese, sometimes fish. Simple meals, but satisfying after hours of labor. Conversation drifts lazily. Someone discusses next season's harvest. Someone else mentions a neighbor repairing a canal. Perhaps another gently complains about taxes owed to the temple. Taxes, another timeless human tradition. Apparently they arrived almost as early as cities themselves. No one seems especially thrilled about them. Across 5,000 years, that feeling remains wonderfully consistent. As everyone rests, an older farmer begins telling younger workers about seasons long past. He remembers years when the rivers flooded perfectly. He remembers years when drought threatened entire villages. He recalls a particularly difficult harvest decades earlier. No written history records his memories, yet they matter. Knowledge often survives through conversation long before books become common. Every elderly storyteller is, in a way, a living library. The shelves simply happen to walk around. Eventually, the heat begins to soften. Work resumes. Bundles of barley are gathered. Canal gates adjusted. Tools repaired. Oxen led back toward home. The pace remains calm. No frantic rushing. The work will continue tomorrow, and the day after that. Agriculture teaches patience better than almost anything else. Seeds refuse to hurry. Rain ignores deadlines. Crops have never cared about anyone's schedule. Nature politely reminds humanity that some things simply take time. As evening approaches, we turn back toward Uruk. From the distance, the city rises gently above the flat landscape. Its temple platforms catch the warm light of the setting sun. Smoke curls upward from hundreds of homes. The walls appear almost golden. It looks peaceful, steady, permanent. Of course, we know history better. Nothing remains permanent forever. Empires rise. Cities flourish. Then centuries quietly reshape everything. But tonight, none of that has happened yet. To the people walking beside us, Uruk feels eternal. The canals will always flow. The temples will always stand. The fields will always provide. Tomorrow will resemble today, and today has been good enough. The farmers pass through the city gates carrying their tools. Children race ahead toward home. A tired shepherd counts his sheep one last time. Somewhere inside the city, fresh bread is already filling the evening air with its familiar smell. The world's first great city prepares for another peaceful night, and our slow journey through ancient Uruk continues. Another morning arrives over Uruk. By now, the city feels almost familiar. You know where the temples stand. You recognize the winding canals beyond the walls. You can almost smell the bread baking before sunrise, and hear the distant braying of donkeys announcing, once again, that they have very important opinions about absolutely everything. Some mornings never change. Today, however, we're following a different group of people. The travelers, the merchants, the traders who quietly connected Uruk to lands so distant that many citizens would never see them with their own eyes. When we think about the ancient world, it's easy to imagine isolated civilizations living entirely on their own, but reality is far more interesting. Even 5,000 years ago, the world was already surprisingly connected, not by highways, not by airplanes, certainly not by overnight shipping, but by slow, patient journeys that sometimes lasted weeks or even months. The city gates open shortly after sunrise. A small caravan prepares to leave. Several donkeys stand patiently beneath heavy bundles tied carefully across their backs. One carries woven textiles, another holds jars of oil, a third is loaded with finely crafted pottery, destined for a settlement many days away. The merchants inspect every rope twice. Experience has taught them that discovering a loose knot halfway across the desert is a remarkably unpleasant surprise. Ancient travelers understood preparation. When your nearest help might be 2 days behind you, you become very organized. Travel was rarely comfortable. Forget smooth roads. Forget roadside cafes. Forget checking online reviews before choosing a place to spend the night. Most journeys followed dusty tracks worn by countless feet and hooves over generations. Sometimes travelers walked beside rivers, sometimes across open plains, sometimes through marshes buzzing with insects that probably believed every traveler had arrived solely for their dinner. Nature has always welcomed visitors, in its own unique way. The merchants leaving Uruk know exactly where they're going, or at least they hope they do. Maps as we know them don't exist. Instead, roots live inside people's memories. Older traders teach younger ones. Follow the river until the large group of palms. Turn where the old shrine stands. If you've reached the rocky hills, you've gone much too far. Navigation depends on landmarks, stories, and experience. Getting lost is not considered an exciting adventure. It's considered an expensive mistake. Back inside Uruk, the marketplace slowly fills once again. This isn't a permanent shopping district with neat rows of identical stalls. It's constantly changing. Merchants arrive. Others leave. Goods appear one week and disappear the next. A visitor strolling through the market would hear dozens of conversations blending into one gentle murmur. Prices are discussed. Weights are checked. Promises are made. Negotiations begin. Because apparently humanity invented bargaining almost immediately after inventing trade. No price is ever truly final, at least not until both people have sighed dramatically several times. One merchant proudly displays polished beads made from shell. Another offers beautifully woven baskets. Nearby, a craftsman carefully arranges copper tools that catch the morning sunlight. Copper remains precious. Every axe, every knife, every chisel represents weeks of skilled labor and long-distance trade. Metal doesn't simply appear in southern Mesopotamia. Someone had to mine it. Someone had to transport it. Someone had to shape it. Every finished tool carries the work of countless hands. It's easy to forget how many people contribute to even the simplest object. A customer lifts one of the copper knives. He examines the edge carefully, turns it toward the light, asks a few questions. The merchant smiles politely. The customer frowns thoughtfully. Neither wants to appear too eager. Negotiation, after all, is something of a performance. Both sides know roughly how the conversation will unfold. The merchant begins high. The buyer begins low. Eventually they meet somewhere in the middle. Hopefully. If not, well, there are always other stalls. Nearby, another trader has arrived with something far more colorful, lapis lazuli. Its deep blue surface almost seems to glow. The stone comes from mountains nearly 2,000 kilometers away, in what is now Afghanistan. Imagine that journey. The stone passes through countless hands, crosses rivers, mountains, deserts, villages, cities, long before reaching Uruk. By the time it arrives here, it has already lived a remarkable life, and now it may become jewelry for someone who has no idea how far it has traveled. Trade brought more than goods. It carried ideas, languages, stories, religious beliefs, new technologies. One traveler might describe a distant city. Another shares news of unusual farming methods. Someone else introduces a different style of pottery. Civilizations rarely develop in complete isolation. People borrow, adapt, improve, then pass ideas onward. Innovation often travels quietly inside ordinary conversations. Let's step toward the river. Here, another kind of traffic fills the landscape. Boats. Long wooden vessels glide slowly along the water. Some carry grain. Others transport reeds. Several arrive loaded with fish caught farther upstream. The rivers are highways. Reliable ones most of the time. Moving heavy cargo by boat requires far less effort than dragging it across land. Even today, rivers remain among history's greatest transportation routes. The people of Uruk understand this perfectly. Several dock workers unload cargo with practiced efficiency. Large jars are lifted carefully, bundles of reeds stacked neatly. Nothing is rushed. Dropping valuable cargo into the river would create a very disappointing afternoon. One supervisor counts every shipment. Another marks deliveries onto a fresh clay tablet. Yes, the scribes are here too. Wherever goods move, records follow. It seems impossible to escape paperwork once civilization invents it. Not even 5,000 years ago. Among the visitors arriving today is a merchant from a smaller settlement to the north. His accent sounds slightly different. His clothing is cut a little differently. He carries unfamiliar pottery. Children watch him with curiosity. Travelers often become attractions themselves. People naturally wonder about distant places. What do they eat there? How big are their cities? Do they worship different gods? Is the weather better? Human curiosity has always crossed borders faster than people could. The merchant spends the afternoon exchanging stories as readily as merchandise. He speaks of settlements growing larger each year. He mentions new irrigation canals being built farther north. Someone asks whether the roads are safe. He shrugs. Mostly. Which, translated into every language throughout history, usually means they're safe enough, probably. Ancient travel demanded optimism. Perhaps a little stubbornness too. As the afternoon drifts toward evening, the market begins winding down. Unsold goods are packed away. Animals are watered. Merchants count the day's earnings. Some are pleased. Others quietly wish tomorrow's customers might be slightly less enthusiastic about bargaining. Hope returns every morning. That's one reason markets never truly disappear. Before heading home, several merchants stop at the temple. Some leave small offerings. Not because business has gone badly, quite the opposite. Good fortune deserves gratitude. Successful journeys require many things. Strong animals, good weather, honest partners, healthy workers, safe roads, and perhaps a little help from the gods. Even experienced traders rarely object to extra good luck. As dusk settles over Uruk once again, the city exhales. Smoke rises gently above countless rooftops. Families gather in courtyards. Fresh bread passes from hand to hand. Someone begins telling another familiar story beneath the evening sky. Tomorrow another caravan will leave. Another boat will arrive. Another shipment of barley will be counted. Another clay tablet will quietly preserve another ordinary day. None of the merchants realize that thousands of years later, archaeologists will piece together fragments of their lives, from broken seals, worn pottery, and tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay. They simply think they've finished another day's work. Sometimes history hides inside the most ordinary moments. And perhaps that's the quiet lesson of Uruk. The world's first great city wasn't built only by kings or priests. It grew because thousands of ordinary people woke up each morning, loaded their donkeys, opened their market stalls, counted their goods, and trusted that tomorrow's journey was worth beginning. The stars slowly appear above the ancient city once again. The marketplace falls silent. The river continues flowing through the darkness, just as it did yesterday, and just as it will tomorrow.